Hello everybody, this is Cheri from DJ Sundries, and today we are going to make another tag. So I already have my tag pre-prepped and ready to go. It's got the to and from stamped on the back, and this is out of craft card. Now I honestly can't remember if this is a purchase tag or if this is one that I made, but it's the one we're using tonight. So I also have this stencil from Tim Holtz we're going to be using, and we're going to be using this rustic wilderness embossing glaze, as well as some texture paste. We'll also be using some other things. Now I had these little veneers. They're really old. I don't know where I got them or how long that I've had them, but I had quite a few of them. And so what I did is on one side, I sprayed them with mica spray. And the spray that I used was, actually I used two. I used Tree Lot and I used Fresh Balsam, one from last year and one from this year. So I sprayed those, and then I took the Tim Holtz nesting circle dies and I cut a bunch of circles. So I'm going to start by just putting this, adhering this little balsam tree onto the circle. So I have my Gina K Connect glue here, and I am just going to put a little glue. It does not take a lot. I learned when I was doing this that the glue squeezes out and gets all over very easily, and it takes very, very little glue to make that tree stick to the paper. But I am going to set that aside, and then I am just putting my little weight on it right there. So now the next step is using the texture paste. So I have my little palette knife here, and we are going to put some texture paste on here. Now, you might ask, is this a card that would be good to mass produce? I would say it depends. It depends on how much you love the technique, first and foremost. If it's something that you really like, you like the way it looks, then it might be worth mass producing. If it is, if you are going to mass produce, just know it's going to take a lot of time. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Now I have some in the lid that I didn't manage to get scraped off before, so we're going to just use that. I'm going to put that on the bottom of my palette knife. I'm going to line up my stencil. I'm not using anything to stick the stencil and the tag down because I'm just very gently going to go over it, and it really does not shift a whole lot. So I am very, like I said, very gently going over this, putting a thin layer of the texture paste. So now I am going to, I do have some stick and seal, or I can't remember what it's called, but on there, so that it will help keep the texture paste moist. I did pull out some other texture paste that I had, and it was quite a bit thicker, not as creamy as this, but it was simply because it was old, had been open, and even with the press and seal, it hadn't sealed as well as it should have, and it was fairly dry. So that took a lot more work with that drier texture paste. That nice creamy consistency is really good. So now I'm going to very carefully lift that straight up because I don't want to slide around and get it on my mat. And I just have a paper towel setting here. Really, you would normally want to clean that off very quickly. And once I'm done with the video, I will clean it off very quickly. So now we're going to go to the next step, which is applying our embossing glaze. So right now I'm just going to set that tag to the side so I can clean up my mat. Have a wet wipe here because I definitely do not need to get texture paste all over everything. And it gets all over if you don't keep it really clean. So we are going to just clean that off, and then we're going to apply our embossing glaze. Now I'm pretty generous with the embossing glaze because I have it on a piece of paper. I can save it all back. So I'm just going to slide this back onto the camera, and we are going to very generously apply the embossing glaze. And then we're just going to tap off all of the excess. Now the next step is very, very important. You want to set this aside to dry. You want to make sure that everything's covered, first of all. And I see a little corner here that isn't, a little bit in that corner, and a tree up there that didn't get it covered as well as I liked. but you want to make sure that it's very, very covered, and then you want to set it aside to dry. It has to be completely dry for your best results before you go ahead and do the embossing. So I'm just going to set this aside. I have a little place on my left over here. I'm going to set this aside to dry, and then I'm going to carefully just funnel all that extra embossing powder or embossing glaze back into my cup. So that portion is all done. So while that's drying, I'm going to move on to the next, the next step then would be to go through after it's dry and heat emboss it. So that brings me to the next point about this tag and mass producing. It seemed to me that it took quite a long time to heat emboss a tag with this particular process. I think it was, I don't know if it was from the texture on the tag, but I will tell you that when my embossing gun was nice and hot, it took an average of 2 to almost 3 minutes to go ahead and do your tag. So if you've got that kind of time, then definitely it is so worth it, because look at that beautiful texture. Now I have already heat embossed this, but if I just turn it just a little bit, you can see that gloss and that shine from the tag. And it is, there you can really see it right there. And if you feel it, it just has that nice glassy texture of the heat emboss or the glaze. Isn't that pretty? So now we're going to move to the next step. And quite frankly, this tag, the hard part's done. So we're going to go back to our little guy that was sitting under my, weight here, and we're just going to glue it down. So I'm just going to take my Gina K Connect and put a little bit of glue again on the center, because again, it definitely creeps out the sides. And then we're just going to press it down and hold it. You could put this, actually, it works really well to put a heavy block over the top as well. You might be wondering about the paper that I used underneath the tree. It's just some red paper I had in my stash. If I had to venture a guess, I would say it's Recollections, just because I have quite a bit of old Recollections in my stash, and that's what I would assume it is, but that's just a little bit that's in my stash. Now I have a little bit of glue seeping out here. I'm going to wipe it off with my finger. It's not something that is super important to do, because that glue will dry clear. So that's another thing to think about when you're gluing and when you're doing things. Am I choosing a glue that dries clear? Because if it seeps out, I don't want it to be seen later, okay? So now to finish off our tag, I have this little piece of ribbon. Now this is just some, you see the little spots in it. I don't know if you're picking up the shimmer and the shine, but this is actually ribbon that I made myself out of seam binding, and I used, no, it's not Winterberry. It is Cocktail Party, which was from the fall collection this year. And that was a very close match to my paper. And I made quite a bit of this, but I didn't realize for the amount of tags that I was doing how much it would take. So I cut pretty small pieces of it for this tag, just so that I could just have that little pop at the top that matches the bottom. But all I did was just tie it once. Now you could go back in after you get it tied and get it trimmed all up nice and neat. In fact, I will do that right now. Now, if you wanted to dress this up just a little more, there's a couple other things you could do if you chose to. You could always cut it at an angle, by the way, when you're cutting ribbon, because it does help it be less likely to fray if it's at an angle. Still may fray. This seam binding does seem to fray pretty easily, but that might help it to be less likely to fray. So this is our finished tag. What I was saying before is if you wanted to dress this up, you could ink around the edges. Just get your blending tool and maybe use Rustic Wilderness, or you could even use a Cocktail Party. But for me, I just wanted this simple tag. Now you might be saying, well, where do you get those veneers? I don't know. I've seen veneers. Hobby Lobby has these little wood veneers. I don't know if they have trees or not. I've actually had these for, I don't even know how many years in my stash. I don't know where I got them. I don't know exactly where to get more, but I did do an alternative. So I had a stamp set. You can pull any stamp set that you have. I happen to have this also old stamp set from Close to My Heart with these 3 little trees in the back. So what I did is I took this little tree with the polka dots just because I like that one, and I inked that up with Rusted Wilderness Distress ink, and I stamped them on one of the circles. And so this is an alternative that you could do. Still pretty. You almost could go with the tag without any embellishment on it, but I just wanted that little extra pop to make this tag just a little bit more special. So I hope you enjoyed watching this. Pretty simple to do. Definitely more time consuming than the first 2 tags in the series, I would say, just because the embossing did take a lot longer, it seemed like, and I think it was because of the texture paste, but definitely worth the effect. So thanks so much for stopping by today, and remember, take some time to enjoy the little things. Have a great day. Bye.